This podcast is proudly brought to you by www.maximusmark.com and Enterprise Fitness. Hey folks, welcome to the show that punches you in the face with information, but in a good way. It's Maximus Mark Radio. And today we have a very interesting show. Today's guest is a professional natural bodybuilder. He has won multiple titles and he's the CEO of Overload Fitness. Today, Josh is going to share with us his very interesting story of how he packed on roughly around 40 pounds of muscle by switching to raw food eating, which I'll let him tell the story. So welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well today. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. So I guess the first and most obvious question is, how did you get involved in bodybuilding?
I was an athlete. I played sports, primarily football, and I did that through high school and college. And when that ended, I think I had a little bit of a void. So I had strength trained for those other sports, and it was a natural transition for me to get involved in bodybuilding. And that was my first contest, 1992, so 20 years ago, right?
Yeah. It's a long time. So have you competed internationally, or is it just mainly in the US?
No, I competed in the World Championships in Paris, France, representing the US in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
So in France, Canada, I turned professional in a Canadian organization, and also here in the U.S. extensively.
Yeah. And what federation have you been competing for? Has there been multiple federations?
A number, but I'm professional in the NGA, which is the National Gym Association. I think they're one of the longest standing organizations, or pure natural organizations here in the U.S.
Yep.
And then also IDFA in Canada. They're an all-natural organization as well.
Yeah. I was on, I think it's Raw Food, just correct me if I'm wrong, it's rawfoodbuildsmuscle.com, which is your new website, new program that you're putting together. Is that the website?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Rawfoodbuildsmuscle.com, project Randy Roach and I started.
Yeah, and I was watching the video on there, and it was a great video. But you kind of touched on the story that your contest preparations have in the past, before you got into raw food eating. I think you said you're about 190 pounds, and now you're sitting much heavier than that, and you're leaner. Can you share a little bit about that story?
Yeah, when I started competing in the early '90s, my reference was the bodybuilders of the '80s. The bodybuilders of that time were using high protein, moderate to high carb, and very, very low fat diet. So that's what I ran with.
Mm.
And I think my competition weight would be anywhere from maybe 159. Believe it or not, I'm almost 6 feet tall, so 159 up to maybe low 170s.
Mm.
And then off season, I usually gain about 20 pounds, so I could get up in the mid 190s.
Right.
And if I ever shot up too high, like 198 or over, I would just look fat. I look like a guy that didn't work out.
Yep.
So I keep my weight out, like you said, around 190-ish. And that was all through my 20s and all through my 30s. And in my late 30s here, I met Randy, who was treating illness with raw food and also a bodybuilder. And he introduced me to the program, and very, very quickly, I started to put on a lot of lean mass, and we're talking at a pretty advanced stage. I hadn't added much muscle mass in years, and at 40, now my off-season weight is right around 239, 240.
Wow.
And before, my off-season weight never got over 198, so we're talking 40-plus pounds of mostly lean.
Yeah. So another question I guess had before we get into what the diet really consists of. Did you change your training, or was there anything else? Any other changes? Was it just the diet?
Yeah, training's always evolving, and I think it always changes. But for all practical purposes, I've been a high-intensity guy since 1995, and the basic template of my training is pretty close to what it's always been.
Right. Okay. Now, when we're talking about raw food, we are talking about raw meat. A lot of people, think of raw vegetables the minute you talk about raw food, but this is absolutely raw meat. So, I guess the first question that everyone has about raw food, especially when I started to make the switch, is, do you eat raw chicken?
Yeah, absolutely. I've eaten as many as 2 or 3 pounds of raw chicken in a day.
Right.
It's really easy.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the people who, I guess there's big listeners on the line right now going, did he just say he ate raw chicken? And I know the story about Randy, how he ate, it was left out on the counter and it crusted over, and he ate that raw chicken and it was a bit old. But people, I guess, aren't used to hearing that. So, what are the benefits of switching to raw?
Enzymes, I think, are the biggest issue. That the foods full of enzymes naturally occurring, and bacteria naturally occurring, and these bacteria and enzymes aid in digestive process. Additionally, the food doesn't become denatured, so I think we have a more bioavailable protein and a quicker digesting protein. And I believe, as a natural bodybuilder, the rate-limiting factor, the bottleneck for us, is digestion. And I think when you can improve digestion and assimilation, you open up a lot of room for muscle adaptation. At least that's been my experience.
Right. So, would you be able to take us through an average day? Like, what would you have? You wake up, is it beef or?
I like to start the day just like anybody else with some raw eggs.
Yep.
The reason I'll start with the raw eggs is they digest really, really quick. And maybe much like someone would use a stimulant, like they use coffee in the morning, I get energy buzz from the raw eggs.
Right.
As soon as I pop out of bed, I'll pop some raw eggs. Now, I've learned some of this from Randy Roach, and I've learned some of this from Augenis Vonderplant, who's a very progressive nutritionist in raw food, and your listeners would know him.
Yeah, actually, I had Augenis on a couple of months ago, and we spoke.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay, so go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, we did a podcast together, Jonas. He was in Thailand when we did the podcast, and it was a really, really great interview. So, yeah. Sorry, continue with what you were saying.
Yeah, so I got a lot of this from Augenis, and I did a consult with him, I guess over a year ago, and I had some heavy metal disturbance, and he thought that some cheese without raw egg would help. Some real good raw fat in the morning would help draw some of those toxic mercury levels down. So I usually start the day with some raw cheese made from raw milk, and I pop a couple raw eggs. I do that as soon as I get up, and then I can go get ready. I can take a shower and shave and get going for work. And then after I do that, I go out to my vegetable juicer and make a green juice. Green juice can have any number of ingredients, but a celery base. I use some parsley that also helps with toxins. And sometimes carrots, sometimes squash, cucumber, any number of things. And I'll also take a couple more raw eggs with that, especially if I'm using a lot of carrot juice, because carrot juice is high glycemic and it might spike your blood sugar. So the eggs might stabilize that too. So I might go a couple eggs right when I get up, and a couple eggs with some vegetable juice, and eat that, and then I'm off about my day. So that's kind of my combination for my first meal. And you'll see that eggs are very important on a raw food diet. They come in everywhere, but that's how I start.
Yeah, I guess one of the questions I have, because I definitely do consume some, a fair bit of raw eggs as well. When we look at, I guess, traditional nutrition, one of the, I guess, most common food intolerances is eggs. If you have eggs, so for a prolonged period of time, you can develop allergies or sensitivities, is probably a better word, to those eggs. Do you think on a raw food diet, you can kind of get away with having them for a lot longer and not develop those sensitivities?
Well, I've been eating raw food for 3 years, so maybe I'm not old enough and wise enough in it to know for sure, but I haven't had any intolerance, and we're talking at very, very high volumes. Eggs are my go-to because they're the easiest fast food.
Yeah.
And there are times when I'm traveling, and I counted them before, where I've done 45 raw eggs.
Wow.
In a day.
Yeah.
I haven't noticed. And the interesting thing is, when I would eat a cooked egg, I would sometimes get some gas, some flatulence.
Yep.
I don't ever get that sulfury reaction from an egg.
Right.
So I haven't tolerance, and I've consulted with quite a few other people that are eating the raw eggs, and I haven't seen that either. Now, when I was doing more of the conventional dieting, I developed some real intolerances to a lot of the starches and the gluten foods, like oatmeal and even. But I haven't seen it yet. The digestibility may have a lot to do with that. I'm not sure. We don't get the metabolic backup that we might when it's cooked.
Yeah, I was speaking to Randy about vegetables. Now he juices all these vegetables, and he doesn't really include too much of it in his daily routine. What's your take? Do you juice all your vegetables? Do you cook them? Do you have them raw? What do you do with your vegetables?
I don't eat any cooked vegetables right now. The vast majority are in a green juice. The fiber really slows down digestion, and it really curbs the quantity that you can eat. For some people, that might be a good thing, but to get the micronutrients from the vegetable juice, I'd like to consume a higher quantity. I often eat, I wouldn't say often, but on occasion, I'll eat a large green salad, and I usually do that for my last meal of the day if I'm going to eat it, because I don't want to slow digestion from all my other meals. But nothing cooked as far as the vegetables. Mostly juiced and occasional green salad with some olive oil and balsamic vinegar.
Okay, yeah, that's so. I guess one of the concepts in fitness and bodybuilding, and you pick up a Muscle and Fiction magazine, as you'd call them, and they talk about missing meals, and you can't go 3 hours or 2 hours without missing a meal, and all that type of thing. On a raw food eating plan, or even just in general, I guess what's your take on missing meals? How many meals a day would you have? Do you think that's something we should worry about? Do you think we need to aim for a certain amount, or is it just eat when you're hungry?
I'm going to say both, but let me expound here. The traditional bodybuilding food programs that are based on a higher carb intake, that are based on a cooked food intake, you're going to have probably higher spikes in your blood sugar and lower drops in your blood sugar. So if you don't, and I've done it this way on conventional diets, if you don't eat every third hour, you really run into some performance issues. You can become grouchy, and you can become sweaty as your blood sugar changes, and performance might go down in the gym. I believe when you're eating the raw food that you won't run into those same blood sugar issues. You won't get as ravenously hungry. But I do think there's some advantage to relatively frequent feeding.
Right.
Every 3-4 hours. But I don't feel that need where I have to eat that often. And I also think there's a big difference between performance eating and someone who's just trying to have optimal health. I don't see any reason why you couldn't eat just a few meals a day on a raw food diet and make them larger. But I think for performance eating and the calorie consumption, I really have to eat a lot of calories to keep my body weight up this high. It's going to take relatively frequent feedings, but I don't see them as an absolute requirement for this eating paradigm. Where I did with the conventional paradigms, I just didn't feel good if I didn't eat that often. And often, I forget to eat during the day. I'm so busy with clients that I can go quite a few hours, and I feel really, really good that way. So it's possible.
So on average, how many meals a day would you have?
There's the morning breakfast I just talked about, mid-morning lunch. There's 3, probably 1 before dinner, 4 or 5, probably 7.
Okay, excellent. Alrighty, and I guess another question will probably come to a lot of the listeners' mind is, bodybuilding dogma. When you finish a training session, you have a protein shake. You have a whey protein shake. Do you have a whey protein shake, or do you have eggs again?
I'm not too impressed with whey. There's certainly some amino acids in whey protein that could go into the anabolic process. I think it's a relatively inferior and incomplete food. I think it's a food component.
Right.
And I would rather get some cholesterol in there.
Yeah.
If you look at some teachings of Mauro Di Pasquale of anabolic diet, he talks about cholesterol as being a very, very important component to start the recovery process, and not putting in a bunch of fast-acting protein or carbohydrate because that spike in insulin starts to shut down some of the anabolic process.
Yep.
So I'm hesitant to put in a whey because whey protein can be as insulinogenic as carbohydrates, and I think it might shut down some of the anabolic process. So I'm almost the exact opposite. I'd like to go again, and I know we've talked a lot about it, but I'd like to go 2 to 4 eggs right after training.
Yeah.
The cholesterol, I think the cholesterol can feed hormone process. I think the protein can act there for anabolic process or even energy demands, and so can the fat. And you don't want a real heavy meal right after training. So that's my strategy again right there, right as soon as the workout ends, a couple of eggs, and then probably a little bit later a couple more, and then I can start to think about more solid food meal.
One of the things I guess I'll just share with the listeners that I've been doing recently, and I'll get your take and your feedback on this, is after training, I've definitely got myself some raw milk, not pasteurized, not homogenized, raw milk. I get some raw honey, I get 2 eggs, and I do still using a little bit of whey protein, and basically put that in. And a teaspoon to a tablespoon of raw butter. I put that in a blender, and that's basically my post-workout shake. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no problem with that. There's a lot of calories there.
Yeah, it is.
And yeah, that's pretty close. That's pretty close to a meal, and I guess it just depends on your strategy.
Yeah.
It's depending where that comes in the day. I will say this: if the milk is cold and there's a lot of food mixed, for me, I'll bog down a little bit.
Right.
Bog down, my energy drops. Now say I train at 6 o'clock at night, and I made this little milkshake that you made with the eggs and the honey and the butter and the milk. It really brings down my tone. It might even kick on some things with the parasympathetic nervous system,
right,
or the opiates, and might kick some things. And so I don't have a problem with it. I just think it depending on the time of day, it might slow me down a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I normally have it after training, which is during the day. So I guess I'm still playing with the recipe, seeing to get it right. I'm finding that the whey protein is probably one of the things that can be removed from that mix. But it's still a work in progress. But I am finding it to be a very nice tasting shake, as well as helping me recover. So sorry.
It sure does taste good, and that's one thing that I don't think the whey protein's a requirement in that shake, especially with all the other protein sources you're getting. I have done this, and I have recommended for some people. Some of those whey proteins are very tasty, some of the chocolates.
Yeah.
And you can put a little bit in with your milk just to change the flavor or give you some more variety. So it's kind of funny using it less for a protein source because you're already protein dense on the diet, but using it more for palatability or to increase taste or flavor of a milkshake. I see more efficacy there than actually the protein supplement.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess one of the questions I've definitely ran into, and I'm sure you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. That's for sure. I just started this year really getting into the raw food, but people will always say that's dangerous. You'll get sick. You've been doing this for 3 years. How do you answer that?
I haven't had a foodborne illness, and I have had foodborne illness from cooked food. The assumption, I guess, is that bacteria is what makes us sick. And I'm not sure that bacteria makes us sick. I think that there must be some disruption of the normal terrain, some overgrowth of some bacteria and some loss of some other. I mean, our digestive tract is full of bacteria. And I think when the natural terrain is stable, that we're unlikely to get sick from food. And I think when the natural terrain has been interrupted, that we're very likely to get sick from food if we don't prepare it and keep it under certain conditions. I've done the same as Randy. I've left food out on the counter, and I've eaten raw chicken, and I have to be honest with you, I've been a lot less cautious with even hand washing some things just because I don't have this bacteria phobia anymore. I'm not convinced that we get sick from bacteria. I think we get sick from the imbalance or overgrowth. The analogy I've given some people, and this is all my theory, I don't know what I have to back this up other than my experience, but occasionally women will get a yeast infection, unrelated to raw food eating. They just get a yeast infection. It's the same bacteria that's existing in that area, but there's an overgrowth, and that's what causes the disruption. Right. And I think that these relationships might exist with cooked food. When we cook them, we change their terrain, and then there can be an overgrowth of some bacteria. So it may not be as simple as just saying it's bacteria. It may be somewhat circumstantial, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that does. I've heard a few functional medicine doctors actually. I was watching a presentation the other day on gluten, and he was talking about, forget that he was a researcher in Italy, functional medicine doctor. He's one of the key guys who studies gluten. And he was basically saying exactly about the terrain, the relationship with bacteria. And he also went forward to make the point that we're 99% exactly the same, not similar, but identical to chimpanzees. The difference, he quoted something like we have, I think genetic-wise, we have 30,000 genes, which is very similar, but we have, I think it's like 1,000 times more bacteria, and that's the differential factor between us and chimpanzees is the amount of bacteria we have in the gut. It was a very good presentation. I can't remember where I was looking at it. I think it was on one of the Functional Medicine Institute links I was finding, but he was making reference to that. So yeah, he was talking about the terrain, bacteria, and basically what you touched on there. So yeah, really interesting to talk about. When I started raw food eating, there was that, I guess, that moment where you go, oh shit, I'm eating raw food for the first time. Will I get sick? Were you scared to, I guess, start eating raw chicken, or did you just jump right in?
The chicken was a little bit more intimidating just because of the stigma that goes with it. And even the raw beef the first time was a little bit weird. The best I can tell people is if this is something they're going to approach, they're going to have to approach it slow. And the best analogy I can give them is I've always eaten sashimi. And you have to think at some point, I mean, it's raw flesh, whether you're eating raw tuna or raw salmon, or I've even been in some authentic Japanese restaurants that bring some raw sirloin out.
Yep.
And if that helps, if you can see it in that commercial setting, in that context, it starts to break through some of it. It's not so different in different cultures. It's not so unusual in other cultures.
Yeah, it's not.
Greek beef and the beef tartare. It's pretty common. Chicken is a little bit more unusual to people, but chicken ceviche, using lemon or lime to marinate chicken and eating it raw, again, not so uncommon in other cultures. The reason it's scary is the food supply. If you watch some of these Food Inc. and some of these other food documentaries, we're seeing how poor the food supply is.
Yep.
And that makes people think twice about where their food's coming from. But if the food source is clean and we're picky about it, I'm starting to believe it's almost impossible to get sick from raw food, because I've really pushed things that I would never push with cooked food. That's the best I can say.
Yeah, I was just about to get onto that about sourcing food. Now, when we do talk about raw food, can you please explain about the difference between supermarket meat? Obviously you wouldn't go out and eat mince from a supermarket, because that mince could be from 100 or 200 different cows. Whereas if you're getting it from your local farmer, it's going to be from the one cow. It's going to be grass fed. The nutritional content is going to be completely different. It's not going to be pumped full of cortisol and all the other stress hormones that you find in supermarket meat. And also combine that with obviously supermarket meat is grain fed, which causes cows to obviously live a much shorter life and produce much more milk than they naturally actually should. So sourcing is extremely important. How do you go about sourcing food?
Yeah, I mean, food supply, it matters. If you ever want to have a really profound experience, go to a farmer's auction where they're selling off the cattle to different industries. And you can kind of see a continuum of the different cows. You'll see that the really healthy, robust, the grass-fed cow, he'll sell to a butcher or to a Whole Foods market. And you'll see the sickest, weakest, most degenerated-looking cow going off to McDonald's. They don't care about their food supply. There's a real continuum and a vast difference between what we call red meat and how different a cow can be based on its raised and what it's fed and what its hormone situation is like. For me, it's really easy, and maybe there's cases like this in Australia, but here in the U.S., I live in the Midwest, and I live in Ohio, and there's a lot of farmland around here, and we have a lot of Amish and Mennonites. And Amish and Mennonites don't raise their cattle with hormones or antibiotics. Everything's for their own use, and they're willing to sell to us. So you have to shop around and find a farmer that's willing to do it this way.
Yeah.
And willing to ignore government regulation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just add to that. In Australia, we have Rotary Farmers Markets. So if the Aussie listeners get onto Google, type in Rotary Farmers Market, they should be able to find a local supplier in their area, or even just type in local farmers market. There's some great ones around. I'm best buddies with my local farmer who provides me with all my meat, and I ask him for any of the organ meats. He does it. He vacuum seals it. It's actually cheaper than buying from a supermarket, and the quality of the meat. I mean, as you said before, eating raw when it's grass fed and the cow's raised properly, it's completely different type of meat. It just, even when you cook it, it cooks differently. It's kind of hard to explain. You only really understand it when you've actually, you cook these foods and you eat them, and you understand the difference in the quality of the meat. So, yeah. Now, raw food, I guess in a bodybuilding sense, it's not really anything new. Like people, first time on the call might think, wow, this is a really totally new concept. But, the origins of raw food started with a man named Armand Tani. Can you kind of just touch on that briefly, who that guy was and why was that significant?
Yeah, Armand Tani was a bodybuilder from the 40s and 50s. I think he won Mr. America. My reference to him was the book Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors, written by Randy Roach. And from what I understand, he turned off his stove completely after he was in, I think it was in Samoa, was the story.
Yep.
Some more primitive cultures, and he saw that they were eating the raw fish and the raw meat and the beetles and the snails, and for some reason it resonated for him, and he went that direction. So he wasn't one of the early pioneers doing this. And Vince Garonda, who was a bodybuilding coach and also a bodybuilder of his time, was into raw eggs, and I think he did some raw meat. And there's even some mention of Jack LaLanne doing some of this back in the day. And if you look at the eating patterns of some of the older bodybuilders, especially before the drug scene became so permeated, the structure of the diet, the macronutrient balance, was more towards some of the higher fat foods. Arnold and the bodybuilders in the 70s were eating more beef, and they were eating more eggs, and they ate more liver, and they didn't eat like the bodybuilders do today. Yeah. So whether it was cooked or raw, the nutrient density was more similar to the raw food paradigm that I'm suggesting. This isn't so new, but when the guys are using a lot of the drugs and the hormones, they have to be less particular about food quality because they're so darn anabolic. It's more like calorie control for them to be in or out of shape. Whereas if you're not relying on the drugs, you have to be a lot more particular about getting good cholesterol and good fat and making sure that your other macronutrients are low enough so you don't get over fat. Like I said, I think it's more similar to what bodybuilders did 40s, 50s, 60s, and maybe part of the 70s. Things shifted in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, too true. So we touched on protein patterns just briefly before, but I guess what supplements would you include on a raw? Do you take any supplements on a raw food diet, or is the food just enough?
The longer I've been on the raw food diet, the less I've relied on those type of things. And I'm not sure, I use this language, food parts. I'm not sure when you start dissecting the food into its parts that it's as anabolic. And I think that we have to do less supplementation when our digestion and our assimilation are better. I'd rather use food concentrate than food supplements.
Right.
And what I mean by concentrate, I could get some raw liver. I think it's an Australian source I actually get them from. I think I'm using Dr. Ron. But a raw liver tablet, I consider that a food concentrate. A cod liver oil, a fish oil, a food concentrate. I consider my vegetable juice a food concentrate. Butter, an extract from milk, I consider food concentrate. So I look for dense food concentrate sources to supplement my calorie intake and to get some more micronutrients. But I don't use multivitamin. I don't use individual vitamins or minerals anymore. And a protein powder for flavor on a rare occasion, and I haven't had a need for it. Creatine monohydrate's a big supplement in bodybuilding. I think I get so much creatine from red meat that's probably not necessary either. So my supplement bill has went down. My food bills went up a little bit, but all in all, I think it's a more efficient way, and it's a more predictable way. I mean, we don't really know what all these supplements are really going to do. I think we can be relatively assured that a whole food supply, even if it's relatively dense, should be healthy for us. I just don't know about the supplements anymore.
Alrighty, okay. One of the meals I saw you have on rawfoodsbuildmuscle.com is you mix up butter and honey. Why do you mix up those two ingredients?
I got that from Autogenist again. And the discussion we had is that the red meat, the protein, we'd like it to go to a healing or anabolic process. And the raw fat is going to be used for energy substrate or also to bind to and remove toxins. And if we eat a meal that's high in protein, say I go out and buy a really good grass-fed strip steak, that could be at $17, $18 a pound. And if there isn't enough raw fat with that, you need raw fat with protein for assimilation and for anabolic process. And if there isn't enough fat with that, we think that a lot of that good, healthy, anabolic, nutritive protein might go towards energy substrate. So we always take our protein sources in with fat, and the lower the protein source is in fat, the more we want to add. In other words, if I go out for a sashimi dinner, before I even leave for the restaurant, I might eat some raw cheese and some raw eggs. That's pretty lean meat.
Right.
So a fatty meat, I might take less fat with. A really fatty meat, I might reduce my additional supplemental fat. And also appreciate it. It tastes darn good to mix some butter and honey. The honey can add a little bit more enzyme. The butter can add some fat to the meal for assimilation and for the reasons I just mentioned. And mixed all up together with the meat. There's not a lot of things that I'm eating that are real. The food's pretty neutral when you eat raw. And if you really want to eat something delicious and kind of maybe distract someone from the meaty texture, it's just a really good way to get them started.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I've had with, going raw food, and this is something that I do now, is I cook my food for about 10 seconds on each side, because one of the biggest things I'm just so used, and I just to be honest, I prefer having hot food. Does that come into your game plan at all, the difference between hot food and cold food, or was it very easy for you to, to adapt to that?
I think that changes over time. It's kind of funny. I mean, I think to human beings, warm food is comforting, and it's what we're used. It comes from somewhere. Maybe it's just habit, but that really does change for me over time. And then when I was new at this, I didn't like the texture and the feel of cold. Now it feels more alive and more fresh. I have this debate with my brother all the time because my brother is not a raw food eater, but eats the raw eggs. We don't keep our eggs in the refrigerator. We keep them out. My brother keeps his in the refrigerator. He says you can't eat them warm. It just doesn't feel right to him. And I was the same way. A warm egg, it felt grotesque at first, but now that I've done it for a while, I don't even like the cold egg. And the same goes with it. When someone brings a warm plate of cooked meat to me, it looks dead. I wish I could say it is dead. It doesn't look as nourishing. There's something refreshing about it being cold and still having a high fluid content. And I'm concerned about some of the people that are kind of like you said, you're a hybrid. You want to get the benefits of raw eating, but you want to eat the meat. It's probably okay to do when it's fresh, but realize once you heat that meat beyond a certain temperature, even if it's just the surface, you may have compromised the terrain. And I'm not sure if that makes us more susceptible to foodborne illness. I'm not sure. It's theoretical to me, but heating it might compromise the bacteria, the good bacteria.
Yeah, one of the things that I guess I was warned about from both Jonas and Randy was that if you do ever cook your food like the way I'm doing it, never put it in the fridge. It has to be eaten then and there within, we're talking 5 to 10 minutes, because that's when the bacteria will grow. So if you're going to do it that style, it has to be eaten. Otherwise, if you're going to store it, you either have to have it completely raw or you have to cook it all the way through. So yeah, the hybrid method, if you're going to do it like that, you got to cook, you got to have it, you got to consume that meat, ASAP.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'm glad you pointed that out because it's a very common question.
Yeah, because that's when, at low temperatures is when the bacteria will flourish. So you said before about cold and warm eggs. Is there any difference between cold and warm eggs from, a raw food perspective?
This is interesting, and I can only tell you my experience. I've always kept eggs in the refrigerator. I buy them from the grocery store all my life. So when we get an egg from the farmer, they haven't been refrigerated yet. They've been at room temperature. So I spoke to Audrey about them, and just from my experience, they could sit out for weeks at a time without any problem. And he even thought that the cold would somehow affect the nutritional absorption of the egg. I'm not sure, but here's all I can tell you. If I eat a cooked egg or if I eat a cold egg, I'll get flatulence. I'll get gas from the egg. If I eat a room temperature raw egg, I could eat, like I said, 45 of them in a day and not have any gas. So that has to say something about the digestibility of it. That's one man's experience, but it tells me something.
And with your eggs, do you blend them up or you just drink them as is?
No, I do like Rocky in the movie,
Okay.
Rocky style.
Yeah, you do.
And I've been eating it off and on like that for a long time, but never in this quantity. I like them that way. A lot of people, when you break them in, they're touchy about the texture of the yolk. And for that person, I say blend it a little bit, or even drop in some pineapple or something to kind of distract you from it, if you're not used to it. But a good egg doesn't really have a lot of flavor. I guess it's just texture that you have to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything that people must do when eating raw? Like, for example, I hear a lot of people say if you're going to do that, you need to soak your meat in lemon the night before, or you need to, neutralize it some way or form. Is there any musts that people should be aware of?
You stumped me a little bit. I mean, they must have a good food supply.
Yep.
And I think I'll comment about the marinating in a moment, but I think they have to be careful about food combining. In traditional eating paradigms, we mix and blend all kinds of different foods, and that doesn't seem, from my experience and from my mentors, to be the best way to increase digestibility and assimilation of food. When we start mixing and matching, then there can be some issues. So I might say I must be very cautious about my food supply, and I must be cautious about not mixing and matching different food types, acidic and basic, etc. As far as eating chicken or beef, when you use lemon or some sort of acidic enzyme with it, citrus, what have you, I believe it pre-digests the food somewhat. And to an extent where if you left chicken in with some pineapple for flavor long enough, you'll see that you'll have just soup, basically. The chicken will completely dissolve.
All right.
So for flavor and for digestibility, you may do these things, but for my conversations with Autogenous and from my experience, you may start to cause conversion of some really good anabolic protein sources more towards energy substrates. So beef and pineapple is a meal I really liked when I started with. It seemed very natural to eat those things together, but I wouldn't get in the habit of always doing that. Like I said, the acidity and the pre-digestion converts to quicker absorption and more energy substrate rather than healing in an anabolic process.
Excellent.
So the answer, if you enjoy a chicken ceviche marinade or marinate your steak, I would say do it. I would just say don't do it all the time. I think you're maybe taking away from some of the food quality or the healing benefits of the raw food diet in the first place if you always have to go that angle. But to break in, maybe that's the way to start, pre-digesting your food a bit.
One of the questions, I guess, people, I know, it's kind of an interesting question. Obviously, I have my thoughts on it, but people ask me a lot of the time, is it okay to eat cooked food on a raw diet? How would you answer that?
I have no problem with it at all. I've heard that, too, that people think that if you eat raw food, that somehow you lose your ability to digest your cooked food. And that's ridiculous. I mean, we have enzymic reserves, right? And when we eat a lot of cooked food, I don't care who you are, what your nutritional paradigm is, you have to know if you eat overly cooked food that you're going to deplete your enzymic reserve. And I think that all that you're doing with raw food is you're building up a better digestive capacity and better enzymic reserve. So I don't see any reason why you can't eat cooked food. I don't see any reason why you can't break in at maybe only 10% raw, and 20% raw, and 30% raw, and 40% raw. And I'll tell you, this weekend, I had grilled cheese sandwich. I thought it was delicious. They were made for me. And then I also had a pizza this weekend. And I didn't have any problem with either of those things. And I swear they digest better than when I eat that kind of food. And I don't make regular practice of doing those things, but it just so happened I ate them, and I didn't have issue. And I think for 99% of people, they're not going to go full-bore raw. I did. I woke up one day and decided I was a raw food eater.
Yeah.
But I don't think they even want to go that way. I think they want to experiment. I just helped one of my coworkers convert to raw food eating. I think I'm having put some pictures on our raw food Facebook page because all he did is he switched in the morning. Instead of having oatmeal with a protein powder, he switched to raw eggs. And midday, he would eat a protein bar, and he switched that to raw eggs. and everything else he left the same, just conventional eating. And in 2 months, he's got way leaner and looks more muscular, and that's all we did. So he's maybe 15, 20% raw, if that. And we've seen radical change in his body. I'll have him put the pictures up. But I think that's the way to start. I mean, baby steps.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I started. I started cooking my meat less and less and less. And I mean, even now, as I said to people, I probably cook my meat for now 10 seconds, simply because I like it to be a little bit warm. But yeah, that's exactly how I got into it, and I started myself. Yeah, cool. So tell me about the program that you and Randy are putting together. It's rawfoodsbuildmuscle.com. It looks like a really interesting program.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we look back and we talk about historical context, and Armand Tanny did some raw food eating, and Vince Corona did some raw food eating, and we have to really look back in time. There's no leadership, there's no mentor, there's no one to tell us how to do it, and the only reason I've succeeded doing this is Randy did it for. Before I met him, I think he was 7 years raw. I didn't have a clue where to start. I didn't understand about food combining and what was safe and what I could get away with. I needed a mentor to do this. And between him and Agenus and some experience, I sorted it out. But it took me maybe a year to get on track. And trust me, I went through some growing pains and periods where I couldn't figure out what to eat and where to get my food sources. If people are going to embark on this, if they're going to try to go this route, they're going to need some guidance. So Randy has, I think, close to 10 years experience now, and I have 3 years, and I've been able to get the performance benefits I wanted to from writing, and I want to share this with people. I want to show them how to do it step by step without the big learning curve, so it doesn't take them years to figure it out. So we just thought we'd start with a basic program, and we have a website called rawfoodbuildsmuscle.com. Note that that's builds is plural, rawfoodbuildsmuscle.com, and we released our first product called the Romnivore. And the Romnivore talks about eating raw foods of all types and how to get started, but most importantly gives a thorough historical precedent so people can understand the how. Why would I eat raw food, and who did it before me, and where do I start? And after the Romnivore product, we want to build additional products to get people from just getting started to high-performance eating and bodybuilding diets and go through there. And with my bodybuilding background and with Randy's health background and historical context, I think we put together a pretty good product for people who have the courage to go this direction.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. And you've got a lot of videos on there as well, and plans. And one of the videos that when you go on there is you making one of your meals, which is very helpful to watch and see how you actually do it. So that's great. Now, you're the owner of Overload Fitness, and you have some special type of equipment. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I have a personal training business called Overload Fitness. You can see it at overloadfitness.com. And Overload is generations after the Nautilus principles. I'm a high-intensity bodybuilder, and we use specialized equipment to train. And most people know about Nautilus principles and Arthur Jones and those type of things. And we've taken those things and moved them forward. We have a more advanced type of equipment, a more exacting protocol, better resistance curves built into the machine, and we're trying to carry forward that high-intensity philosophy. And in order for this to expand and for other people to be exposed to this really intense single-set machine training, we had to produce the equipment as well. So we have a factory, and the factory built Renaissance exercise equipment, the name brand for the actual machines that we do the protocol. And people could see these machines at renaissanceexercise.com, and when they look at them, they'll see that they look like really, really advanced Nautilus machines. We took some of the principles from Nautilus, and we brought them forward. We have variable cams rather than a set cam that every user would have the same resistance curve. We can vary the timing of the resistance curve for a different user. So we've taken a lot of the principle and just brought them forward with better technology. Really, really cool equipment. And we'll have some facilities open here in the U.S., one in Texas, one in Minneapolis. We have the two in Ohio. We have Ken Hutchins' facility in Florida. Johns Hopkins University is going to do a research study with our equipment. And there's a number of other people that are getting into or exploring at least using this as their training model. And the big upside is it's more intense training, with less frequent workouts. Our clients are getting very good results at only twice a week training. And I've actually prepared for bodybuilding shows and prepared a number of my staff for bodybuilding shows only training twice a week with this methodology.
Well, that's very interesting. So I guess how can people learn more from you? Where should they go if they want to get in contact with you for either about the equipment or the raw food dieting?
I have email contact on the Renaissance Exercise page. So if they go to www.renaissanceexercise.com, I can be emailed there. Our business location at Overload Fitness. And I do consulting. And, I'm sorry, I left out the most important one. The Raw Food Builds Muscle, my email contact is also on there. And if someone has specific questions about this program, they could actually even post them on the Raw Food Builds Muscle site or on our Facebook page. We have a Raw Food Builds Muscle Facebook page, and I'll answer questions on there. And if anyone wants consultation, I can be contacted through those sites or my Renaissance site. So lots of ways to get a hold of me.
Excellent, excellent. And final thoughts?
With regard to raw food eating?
Yeah, to raw food.
The most important thing I've ever done for my bodybuilding. Been at this, since 1983 working out. And if somebody said, what is the one single most important thing you've ever done, it's switching to raw food.
It's very, very impressive. I want to really thank you for taking your time out today and chatting with us. It's been absolutely great. Some really interesting and, definitely some stuff, to take away and think about. And, if people want to get involved, I think this interview and this podcast is definitely a very informative podcast to get people on the right track and, to show them where they can actually learn more and get that mentorship that, you spoke about before. So, really great work, and thank you for taking your time out today.
I enjoyed it, Mark. I think we should do it again. We can expand more.
Definitely. Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. All right, I'll speak to you next time, Josh. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, it's Maximus Mark. So there it is, folks, the Raw Food Show. Now, some of you may be wondering, or, some feedback that I might be getting is, why didn't I go after? He talked about supplements, and he said, supplements are no good. And, if you've been reading my stuff for some time, you would know that I recommend supplements. So one of the questions may be, why didn't you go after him? Why don't you tell him, you should be using supplements and, do you know the benefits of magnesium and all that kind of thing? I just want to let everyone know it's not that kind of show. It's not a forum to debate my guests. It's like kind of inviting someone over for a Christmas lunch and then scolding them because they're eating the potato pie. It really doesn't make sense, and I don't bring guests on to debate them, that's for sure. So it's more about giving you guys a different perspective of nutrition and helping you, break the mold of mainstream nutrition and seeing what is out there and giving you kind of that different perspective. Now, one of the things that I will say is this. You listen to this interview and if you think, I need to eat raw food. No, that is not the message of the interview. So please do not, take that away. This is, I guess the epitome of edutainment. It's a bit entertaining, it's been interesting, and as well as some education aspects there. So I'm just going to be completely frank with everyone and tell you right now, I do not eat raw chicken. I don't recommend eating raw chicken. It's not something that I'm really going to consider in the future. I don't really like that much chicken anyway. But as I said on the phone, I do eat my meat, 10 seconds on each side, and that's basically how I eat it. So, you should never be afraid of your food. Never be afraid of your food. So if raw food eating isn't for you, that's completely fine. If you are inspired, perhaps, to include some raw eggs in your diet, well, that's fantastic. And, at the end of the day, horses for courses. You got to do what works for you and what resonates for you. If it doesn't make sense in your mind and the way you approach nutrition, don't do it. No one's forcing you to do it. It needs to make sense to you. It needs to feel good. It needs to be, the right things for you inside and out, so you can get the best shape. You get in the best shape possible. Okay, so I hope that helps. Again, I don't run this show to debate with my guests. I run it to give people different perspectives and a broad spectrum of knowledge for the broader public on different things in nutrition. Because let's face it, the grains and commercial dairy products just simply do not work. They are, crap, and they're making this country fat, and something needs to be done. So here's a different perspective for you. I hope you guys find it interesting. You can leave your comments below. And apart from that, I'm running a seminar on September the 24th, and I want to thank you guys for signing up. It's going to be a great day. It's sold out. Working really hard on putting together something really special. So really looking forward to having everyone on. Check out more of my stuff at www.maximusmark.com/radio, or go onto iTunes and type in Maximus Mark, and really trying to build that channel. So if you guys could leave a review, rate me 5 stars if you like it. If you don't, rate me 1 star. I really don't care. But, leave a review, leave feedback so, you can pass it on to your friends. And the other thing is, feel free to share these podcasts with your friends on Facebook. I encourage that, so no problems there. Till you hear me next time, guys, train hard, supplement smart, and eat well.